6 years ago, I told clients of Gym Launch that they should stop making content because they were wasting their time. I was partially right and partially wrong. And in this video, I want to break down the shift that I've had in terms of content marketing and its role within a business, the 5 phases in building a content marketing machine, and how to focus on one of 2 primary objectives with content marketing. And so if you don't know who I am, my name is Alex Ramosi. I own acquisition.com. Portfolio of companies right now does over $150 million a year. I make these videos because I hope that you use this stuff, you make a bunch of money, and then you come and join acquisition.com so we can invest in your business. That's why I do it. Let's rock and roll with the phases of content. I'm gonna walk through the 5 phases, and then I'm gonna talk about which of the objectives you're solving for each of these, and then finally like an at-scale version. All right, phase 1 is you make something and you post it. That's it. You just gotta post something sometime, somewhere. And believe it or not, a lot of you guys haven't even done phase 1, which is why I have to outline it. Number 2 is that you post something consistently. You create a cadence or a calendar around when you post. You find a platform that you like, ideally one that you're probably already using, and you just post again after you posted once. And you say, you know what? This was 7 days apart. If I do this every 7 days, I will now be consistent. For me, I just know that there's 1 day a week that I do all my marketing stuff. What I do on that day changes, but it's always marketing related. But that's what's worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you. The 3rd phase, you post reliably, and you do it on all platforms. That's a massive increase in the amount of volume that you are posting. This is when it transitions in terms of objectives, and I'll get to the objectives in a second. Phase 4 is that you go from posting just even once on every platform on a regular cadence to maximizing how much every platform can take. The short form platforms can take sometimes 5, 10 posts a day, like Twitter or TikTok, Facebook Reels at this moment. Rules change all the time. If you have a newsfeed style where you have an audience that is pushing stuff to, they tend to fatigue faster and they don't want to get overwhelmed with one person. That's usually where you get capped out at 1 or 2 times a day. And so what you have to do is look at all the platforms, figure out what the max amount is that you can publish on a platform, and then all you do is you crank the volume on all of them at the same time. That's phase 4. Most people never even get to phase 4. And then phase 5, you go from creating for all of those to capturing and creating. For example, if I wanted to have a show where everybody called in and then I could repurpose all that stuff across content, that would be me deliberately creating content in a way across all those channels. But not only creating, but also capturing so that I could further enhance my reach and the amount of volume that I created. And the big rule with volume that I have is that there's no such thing as too long, only too boring. The second rule that I have is quality over quantity, but quantity wins over quality. In order to know what is quality, it usually takes reps to get good. And so you will probably do a lot in the beginning and it will probably suck, and that's okay because it is a requisite for getting good. You start by sucking and then you get better, and then eventually you suck so little, you're actually good. The difference between phase 1 and 2 and phase 3, 4, 5 is the objective. If you're doing phase 3, 4, 5, the objective is to generate new customers from content. And it's different than phase 1 and phase 2, where the only reason you can do that is just to have lead nurture, just to give you guys some sales stuff, just to give you guys some fodder and just test some hooks. Those are the 5 phases. If you're a small business owner, that costs time and that costs money. So what do you do? Because I actually have had this conversation with probably half of our portfolio companies in the last 3 months. What is the role of organic marketing play in the business from a concept of acquiring customers? So that's why we do this stuff, right? We do this to acquire customers. If you have other ways of getting customers, which for most of you would be manual outbound, affiliates, or paid ads, besides referrals. And if those are the primary channels, you do not want to take your eye off the ball on that. That's what's paying the bills. That being said, the purpose or the objective of having the organic content is lead nurture, not lead generation. So what happens is someone comes in through an affiliate, someone comes in through a paid ad, someone comes in through manual outbound because you had an SDR call them or they got a cold email. What do? They look at your social profile, they look at your website and they say, is this person legit? The only litmus test you have to pass there is that you've posted something recently that's not shit. That's really it. They'll probably consume 2, 3, 4 pieces of content and say, this guy or this gal knows what they're talking about. This is recent enough that I know that they're still in business. This is a legitimate business. That's all we're trying to accomplish here. And if you do start to have content that starts performing better than others, that gives you 2 things. One is it gives the sales guys content that they can proactively feed to the prospects. And so what you should build is a master Excel sheet of your best content of all time, because there is some content that you've made knowingly or unknowingly that convinces more people to buy from you. On that content sheet, you'll have what are the FAQs, what are the types of questions that people ask on sales calls, which gives you great fodder for the types of content that you'll make in the future. And again, you do it for 1 for the sales team and 2 for marketing. You do it for the sales team because as soon as they have that question, they can send that as a reply between call 1 and call 2 to close a prospect. Or if they have the question that they found out before the call, they can send it to them beforehand, increase the likelihood they close. So that's the first tangential benefit besides nurture that making this content helps you with. The second one is that it gives you an idea of what you can start leading with on your paid side. They're disproportionately saving it disproportionately sharing it. When you run paid ads, you can look at your organic content and be like, dude, I don't know what it is, people went nuts for this. If for some reason this headline or this hook worked well, you weave it into every one of your cold emails and you can split test it and say, wow, this beat our control. And so think of the content that you're making as just low risk ways of testing hooks and headlines to get people to buy from you. Phase 1 and phase 2, if you're in one of those camps, you don't need to do anything else. That's it. That's all you gotta do. If you wanna know what it looks like to actually use content marketing as a way to generate leads. Phase 3, which is you're posting once a week or on some cadence on all platforms. The purpose of phase 3 is learning what packaging looks like on each of the platforms. If you've ever seen that meme that had like Tinder, LinkedIn, Facebook, and like Instagram, platforms are all a little bit different. Same person, just packaged a little differently. This tweet here, then getting put into a TikTok, then also getting put into a YouTube short, and then also getting put into a reel. It's the same concept, the same subject matter, but we package it a little bit differently. Phase 4 is you then say, great, I feel like we finally get each of these platforms. And this fucking takes time. It takes probably 6 months, and this is if you have means to pay for this stuff. And I'll get into the cost in a second. Maxing out the platforms, which is phase 4. Number 5 is actively creating. So candidly, right now, I'm barely scratching phase 5. We're actually just dialing on phase 4, which is maximizing across all platforms. We're not really there yet. We're maxed out on probably half the platforms. At Mosey Nation, that's what we're doing, right? With 3, 4, 5, you're actually making good enough content that the platforms are serving it to new audiences because they are able to grow the amount of time people spend on the platform because your stuff is good. They pay you in impressions for providing value to their audience. More followers, more likes, all that stuff. You still have to have a way to convert those people into customers. And so the way to do that is just having call to actions. For example, if you're a business doing $3 million or more and you're an internet business, go to acquisition.com and you can fill out the stuff for minority investment. That's what we do. Put that into your content, and then the rest of your time you're just providing value. You don't need to get fancy with it. You don't want to be one of those guys who's just pitching all the time. A lot of people oversell the small amount of demand they have so they can never grow the audience. The more you give, the more you grow. The more you take, the more you shrink. And when you do it that way, you never go hungry because you always have more people knocking on your door than you have seating in your house. From a cost perspective, there's time cost, there's long-term cost, and there's money cost. If you start doing content as your way of getting customers, expect it to take a long time. I started making content for acquisition.com about 18 months before we really started seeing any kind of deal flow or growth across the platforms. If you think about this as a long-term play, I still believe that fame is the most efficient business model. All right, it's one of the best ways to arbitrage making money, but it takes time and no one's willing to wait, which then gives you a competitive advantage because patience is one of the ultimate advantages, is that you're just willing to do things for an unreasonably long period of time without thinking you're smarter than you really are. A quote from Neil Strauss. Even at phase 3, it's going to be pretty much beyond your capacity to actually create, capture, edit, and distribute across all platforms. You're not going to be able to do it on your own. And so you need some degree of leverage. That leverage is going to come in the form of labor. You're going to have to pay people to help you out. In the beginning, the more costly way of doing it, but faster, is to have vendors. So to have people who are specialists on each of these platforms, because what they're going to do is get you up to speed 5 times faster. They're going to already know all the mistakes that people normally make. Now, one thing they have to look out for vendors, and this is especially important, for me, is that most vendors are data driven. And what I mean by that is they get obsessed with clicks and views and impressions and subscribers. That's good to a degree. It's okay to be satisfied with a smaller audience that's just the type of person that you're actually looking to attract. It's hard to make this shift, and it's really hard to ram it down their throats because most clients that pay them only care about those things because they don't know what else to measure. Just because it's easy to quantify doesn't mean it's important. The values that you have, the messages that you want to get out there, who you're trying to reach will be more important than the quantitative metrics. Are those good litmus tests in terms of if nothing you ever have hits? Yeah, you should probably pay attention to that. But if only one specific type of thing hits and it's not core to who you are, you gotta be able to resist that temptation because otherwise you're gonna build this audience doing stuff you don't wanna do, attracting people you don't wanna be with. For us to put out the stuff that we put out right now across all platforms, for Layla and I, costs about $70,000 a month. That's to put out roughly 160 pieces of content a week. You're like, oh my God. I'm like, I know, it's a lot. That's because we're trying to promote. We're using this instead of using paid ads. So if I were to just pay for the impressions, it would cost me about $2 million a month to get the impressions that right now cost me about $70,000 a month. I have a lot of cost savings doing it organically. The lever on that though is how good you are. And that's tough. And it probably sounds weird for me to even say this. So take it the way that you probably or hopefully know that I mean it. Most people talk about stuff that they don't have the right to talk about. Just because you call yourself an expert doesn't make it true. And so the question is, how narrowly can I define the problem that I solve so that in that tiny world, in that pond, I am king. You might not be the best business person in the world, I'm not, but the question is, of all the sources of information that are both entertaining and educational, is the stuff that you put out there good enough that people are like, I will pay attention to this person? Because if you've ever struggled to give away your services for free, it's because the biggest cost isn't your price. If people aren't willing to pay for it with their attention, then it has other costs, which is it's not worth their attention. Why should this person listen to me, and why is this worth their time? If you can answer those questions in the content that you're making in a tangible way that their life is gonna get better as a result, they'll come back and they'll tell their friends. I'm not Andy Frisella, I'm not Gary Vee, I'm not Ed Milet, I'm not all closing in on $1 billion plus, I'm not Grant Cardone. Well, don't try and compete with them. But if you're like, hey, I'm the fastest toilet fixer in this side of Tuscaloosa, you might only be competing against 3 guys. If you have evidence, you are beyond reproach. If someone looks at you and says like, hey man, your content's crap, you can be like, this is how you fix toilets. I'll try and be more entertaining next time, but this is how you fix them. And you have evidence that you fixed 500 toilets this way. First, you're fixing toilets, and then you're talking about how you can expand a plumbing business. And then you're talking about how you can expand a local business. And then you're talking about marketing on whatever specific method you use to grow your thing. And then you're talking about expanding an enterprise. And then lo and behold, you're a business expert. But it takes time. If you're a small business owner, you can do the first 2 phases, just post about stuff, make sure it's valuable, just to make sure that you are a legitimate looking business that looks like its doors say open on it. That's all we're trying to accomplish and help the sales guys out. If you wanna make content marketing your actual lead generation machine, then you need to invest in it the same way you invest in it for paid marketing. You're gonna probably have to have vendors. You're probably, over time, as you learn from your vendors, you're gonna bring employees in-house and you're gonna teach it to them. And then you start scaling the volume up internally. And then phase 5, you go max out mode, right? You start cranking out on everything and then you start creating stuff specifically. But when you're doing that at that phase, you probably don't need to worry about this video.